So what are we going to go back on? We can't trust Google. We can't trust the government. We can't trust, our own selves. What are we going to go back on? Right. Our own innate, say, trusting ability. What David was talking about back in the day, about 5 years ago, he said, right?
Mm.
That's what we're really coming back into, a higher sense of value, a higher sense of, say, trust. So, hi, this is Masati. Welcome to my podcast, Exponential Intelligence. And today we've got a special guest. Normally I don't have guests, but this gentleman is very, very interesting. We're going to follow his journey, his XI journey. It's part of the Ascendance series that we have on the XI podcast. I haven't done the Ascendance series in a while, and now we're having this fantastic guest, and he's going to share his experiences on, well, again, the XI journey. So this topic that we're going to be talking about is called Ascendance, the awakening, the XI factor. So, welcome, David Stone.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you, David. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself. How maybe you got into, doing the XI, how it's changed your life, and well, some of the troubles that you actually see upcoming for some people who might be doing XI.
Yeah, I came to XI about must be 5.5 years ago,
Okay.
and I met you in Birmingham in person. That was kind
Yes.
of the first real experience. I'd seen you on a kind of interview,
Hmm.
and I just got this sense that I could feel your power, basically, the way that you handled yourself in the interview, the integrity and the impeccability, and quite a hostile interviewer. And when I Googled you and I
I
saw
did
you,
remember that.
it was with a guy who was from Brixton, I think, London.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so I met you in Birmingham, and you were about an hour late,
Mhm.
and we could feel this energy building in the room that I've never felt in my life.
Wow.
And leading up to that,
Mhm.
I'd been on my awakening journey. I'd had some full power awakenings, but the ability to embody them and strengthen my presence in a room with all the distractions and things that happen in the world around you was getting on top of me. And
Mhm.
so I, I was seeking, I guess, that stability to really fully make use of the awakening I had because I understood what it was all about, but I didn't know how to embody it.
Mhm.
And I was very impressed with the intensity with which you held your personal space, your identity in that interview, and I was curious to know how to bring that into my life. And had some health issues as well. Back issue was quite a troublesome thing that I'd been going through. So when I came to Birmingham and we were waiting, we just felt this energy building,
Mhm.
and then as you came and arrived, um, there was just a sense of freshness, a sense of clarity. And, I've sat with alleged saints, avatars. I've trained and traveled all over the world
Mhm.
in my kind of awakening journey for the last 20 years. So it wasn't like I was born yesterday. And very discerning, and I knew instantaneously. I could sense the kind of potency and authenticity of what you were bringing.
Wow, thank you so much.
Mm.
So, just to kind of recap, so it wasn't really about even the content that I was talking about. It was literally about the presence, which is
Mm.
really important. It's a key factor, by the way, a very key factor, because most people think, especially in the awakening community, and I want to get back into what you talked about because you said that before pre-interview you were talking about, well, you were awakened, right? You had gone to see saints and all that stuff, but it wasn't fulfilling, or it wasn't completing you. So I want to get into that. But David, you
Sure.
said so. So again, I just want to reiterate, it wasn't really the content or what I was saying or the logic even on what I was saying. It
No.
was literally about somebody's presence that came in. And that's what really affected you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to point that out because nowadays, this is what politicians, this is what salespeople, this is what whoever, I'm thinking about Bill Gates now, all that, right? They've got the credentials, so to speak. Back in the day, they used to wear a white coat. And then it's like, well, they wore a white coat. They've got a doctor behind their name. I should trust them. that started to fail, and then now we don't trust doctors. Back in the day, lawyers, well, they went through college, they know the law, we should trust them. And now, we don't trust them. Politicians, saints, what have you, religious leaders, right? So the key is that, guys, it's not about what they're saying, because what they're saying nowadays, it's scientists, by the way, right? You should trust the scientists and don't trust your own intuition. And that's where we get misconstrued, because this facade here, anybody can say anything. And this is the technology, or say the aspect, or the paradigm that we're getting into, because we can't believe all that stuff. So what are we going to go back on? We can't trust Google, we can't trust the government, we can't trust, our own selves. What are we going to go back on, right? Our own innate, say, trusting ability. What David was talking about back in the day, about 5 years ago, he said, right?
Mm.
That's what we're really coming back into, a higher sense of value, a higher sense of, say, trust. So uh, tell us a little bit about your awakening experience. You said, well, you were awakened before. What's the difference between, this awakening and, say, what happened during that day and through the process of you on your XI journey?
Yeah, my awakening came quite independently. I was in a really kind of negative space. I was quite depressed, and I
Right.
decided I was going to turn it around. This was probably about 11, 12 years ago. And I traveled to America. Went to a conference, I think, like a channeling
So,
conference.
so Dave,
Yeah.
11, 12 years before you met me, or
From now, so about
from now? Okay, got it.
7 years before we met,
Okay, got it.
was like
Mhm.
the light bulb came on,
Right.
and it was a euphoria. It was a sense of knowing I was the infinite
Mm.
and feeling that vastness and almost feeling like I am a galaxy
Mhm.
inside my body. But over the next few years, what I noticed was a lot of my what I now know as ancestral patterns
Right.
hadn't cleared,
Mhm.
but I had the sense that the light bulb was on. So I was at once kind of beaming out light, and people could tangibly feel it around me.
Mhm.
But I was still carrying a lot of the quirks and the dysfunctional aspects of my behavior, my illnesses, my family stuff. That hadn't cleared
Right.
because I hadn't learned to embody it. And
Mhm.
so, in spite of my best efforts and doing some beautiful trainings as a Gestalt psychotherapist and as
Mhm.
a trance
Wow.
medium, which had, mediumship going into trance states, inner child work, sacred sexuality, tantra, all these things were amazing, but they didn't actually enhance my ability to embody that awakening spark, that sense that I was the infinite having a human experience. It didn't, there was no translation kit in the things I was doing to bring that state into a very physical, felt space in time and space. The life I was living.
Yeah. I think you really bring up a good point, David, because a lot of people, so, so at some level you got lost, you got into a deep end somewhere, and then that deep end was like an awakening for you, right?
Mm,
And then you had, say, the possibilities or the grandness that came into you, and then you tried the normal paths,
yeah.
like, and then, well, obviously you're an intelligent, gentleman. So you just didn't go through the woo-woo stuff, like wearing, I don't know, pyramids on your head and, doing whatever, the pineapple dance and all those things that people do, or, whatever. And I'm not knocking the pineapple dance or anything down, guys, but is it working for you? That's all I'm saying. Um, so you did all the, say, God, the energy work. I don't know, what would you call that? People get into, energy or spiritual stuff. Before it was called religion. Then it's called, spirituality, which is basically the same thing. To me, it's just a different transition. Um, and then you tried the gestalt therapies, the sciencey stuff as well, right? So do you want to just kind of, I know you talked about some of them, but what did you learn from, or what didn't you learn, or what was, say, shortcoming in again, say the energy, say
Right.
modalities, and then
Yeah.
the hard science type modalities.
Energetically, it was about sending my consciousness out of my body so that that
Mm,
expansion, that experience got more and more diffused. It got more
right.
and more vague. So I wasn't kind of integrating and consolidating and
Mhm.
solidifying that brilliance that I knew I was and that I'd
Mm,
experienced and tangibly felt. And it lifted me out of wherever I was before. It hadn't actually cleared it out of my body and deleted those patterns. And whatever I tried would give me a temporary sense of, euphoria and expansion. And in
mhm.
the contraction, there wasn't anything rudimentarily changing in my DNA and in my core kind of frequencies and the distortions around those. With the Gestalt, it's a great framework. I
Mhm.
love aspects of it, but I definitely say that these are things that are more like the apps on a mobile phone. They're not the operating system. And what I've come to understand is XI is like the operating system, or it's the blockchain.
Exactly.
It's not the fungible or non-fungible kind of,
Mhm.
you know, altcoins that run
Right.
on the blockchain, which I
Right.
see, spirituality is all those beautiful things that you can purchase, but if you've not got anything to build them on, then you can't consolidate and integrate and really step up to
Right.
live your best life. And that was the problem with all the modalities. They each had a richness and a beauty, but the ability to actually clear the deeper issues in myself and in my life,
Mhm.
no, it wasn't sufficient.
You bring up some really, really good points. So one, and this is a lot of people go through an awakening, um, whether it's like say a divorce or some kind of illness or tragedy or by the way, that awakening can be the flip side as well. You see something so spectacular like having a baby or whatever it might be, so both sides, but unfortunately most people awaken through say a tragic type experience. My experience, my near death experiences, I wouldn't call it, say, a tragic experience nor, say, a joyous experience. It was just more of a neutral experience. I could have taken it both ways, depending on say the mindset that I have. So 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 just a couple points I just want to clarify it in my mind before I ask you, David. So just give me a second. So a there was a point in time where something cracked open for you. You saw your potential, but then from what I'm getting, and correct me if I'm wrong, from what I'm getting is like, oh, this is the potential. I can see it right here. The tools are here for me because this is what everybody else has done. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Would that be fair to say? And then you tried out all these tools. And then you, again, being more aware than most, you woke up to the fact that, hey, these tools aren't getting where I want to go. They're not getting me where the direction that I want to go because I see my grandness here, but these tools are taking me there. Why do you think, David, people would spend their whole lifetime using, say, again, I'm not knocking anything down, say, spirituality techniques or belief systems through religions or even like science, like psychotherapy, psychology, self improvement, and all those things, and they'll go through their whole lifetime believing in something that say didn't work the first year, the second year, the third year, maybe a decade after, they're still in the same situation. Why do you think that they don't see that? I mean, you saw it right away. What was that thing that awoke in you and going, hey, you know what? This kind of stuff should actually give me some physical, say, physical representation that it's working for me. It wasn't like faith based. It's like when I die, it's going to be better for me. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah.
So,
Well,
so what was that?
you don't know what you don't know. And
Oh,
it's like when you're trapped in a lower frequency, you can't know a higher frequency. So you can only
mhm,
see where you're at from the perspective that you're in. So
right.
you do what you do until you don't. In Gestalt, they call that the um, it's Arnold Bezer's theory of contrariness that until you're
Mm,
sick to death or you have an experience that breaks your mold open,
mm.
you'll keep on doing it until it sinks you in the shit, until it's so high up to here. And I think there's a tremendously powerful groupthink that's like a hypnotic kind of soothing energy where you go with one set of issues, you all dump them in the middle.
No, really good conversation. This is Masajati. We've been talking to David Stone. Again, amazing story on his awakening and the difference between normal awakening, because everybody has awakenings, right? But the XI factor. So David, there's in your story, I could go so many ways. I'd have to keep you here for about a day to get all over, all the things that you talked about. But so you awoke. What, and maybe you covered this already, but what was that, say, pivotal moment that you said, "Hey, something's not right here. I need to search for something else." So what was that moment? Can you tell us, that moment?
I think it was shortly after the actual sort of pinnacle of that experience. I was doing a liver flush after I completed you do a colon cleanse,
Mhm.
and I just knew that that space that I was the infinite having this human experience. And then when I dipped into the premises where I was having that experience, there was like ritual and devotional music and devotional singing to one of the Indian religions.
Mhm.
It just felt like it was part of that hypnotic trance state of staying in that lower level awareness as to what awakening truly was. It was like a siphoning off or a side channel where you could be entertained and
Mhm.
feel good, but you were kind of being denied doing the work.
Right.
That I've come since to understand with XI
Right.
and going up in frequencies. It's like it's a lovely side act that keeps you in a kind of delusional sense that you're in this higher frequency,
Mhm.
but you're borrowing it off somebody else. You're not actually inhabiting and growing that within yourself and anchoring that.
Right. So you woke up, you tried some tools that didn't work, you fell into XI, in that interview, that lecture at Birmingham. Um, and then what made you say continue on, or, what was the next steps? So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So your scanning was obviously quite mesmerizing. Your ability just to instantly read someone's physicality. So when you pointed out that yes, I think the very first thing you said was, "Wow, you've reached quite a high point, but you're
Mhm.
carrying a victim consciousness."
Mm.
And I was like, "Damn, he's just like pinpointed the unsayable."
Kind of like a laser,
Yeah,
or like a
and it's like
surgeon. Just let's get to the point.
no one had kind of held me to account on that. May have
Mm.
thought that about me, and then it gave me a trajectory in which to address that.
Mhm.
And then my health issues and my ancestral body imprint legacies, like my physicality, my health, the patterns of aging, all those things were starting to come up in my body. And
Right.
so instantaneously I kind of sensed that yours was a trajectory to starting to really shift myself on the physical levels and to make that that euphoric experience that I felt a flavor of it through your talk and your work and your meditations, how to then deepen that and then claim that and own that and strengthen myself to be my own independent person, enjoying life in that way.
Wow. So just the scan, just literally, is that wedge that I put into you and just hammered it in, and just like you exploded, and it's like, oh shit, this is what's really happening to me. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and I think there's a tendency for many people once they've had that initial session with you to go, right, I've got it now, I'm done.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, I've got my piece of information and I can go off and I'm fine. And there was an element of that, like, well, why would I need to stick at this? Because I've got that initial euphoria of
Right.
feeling myself kind of really like you bring people like being out in nature into that pristine presence where you
Right.
feel congruent, and then it's learning to hold that for yourself.
Right.
That's the training, that's the challenge, that's the rigor of incorporating XI into your daily life.